Hello everybody and Happy New Year from me and from the Wellness Forum gang over here. First of all, as usual, I'll start with a couple of announcements. The first one is we're happy to announce that starting now we are Wellness Forum Health. We actually are a healthcare system. We're looking for providers who want to join our system, and training starts soon. So if you're interested in pursuing that, we should have a conversation really shortly, because January 17th we're going to start training people. All right, so send me an email at pampopper@msn.com if you'd like to know more. Second thing, the advanced study classes for January are based on Kelly Turner's book called Radical Remissions, about people who had literally terminal cancer diagnoses and recovered. I've already started making my slides for the presentations and for the workshops, and I'm fascinated with this book and a lot of what she says. So if you want to know how people with a death sentence survive, these are the workshops you want to participate in. And then last but not least, we are starting classes for the Institute January 19th. So if you are planning to take classes as part of our Nutrition Educator program, you also need to get in touch with us really soon. All right, I have a couple of great topics to talk about today, and the first one is Dr. Oz. And for many years, I've been telling people publicly, I've said it on these video clips, that the Dr. Oz show is pure entertainment, not a reliable source of information about diet, health, and medicine. From time to time, I've addressed some of the silly claims made on the show when readers asked, and I have to admit that I was a tiny bit delighted when Oz was called before a Senate subcommittee and taken to task for promoting questionable products and practices. Now, I really don't like to see people suffer, but I do think that Oz has abused his fame and access, almost 2.9 million viewers daily, to mislead the public. The fact that he's on television has given him credibility that he hasn't really earned, the way that most of us have to earn our credibility. Now, forgive my continued delight as I report the findings of a research group that looked at the claims and statements made on both the Dr. Oz show and another show called The Doctors. The researchers randomly chose 40 episodes of each program and then evaluated all of the recommendations made on those programs, looking for evidence to support them. The researchers used what they called, quote, broad definition of support, including using only one case study to justify making a claim about something, and that's really, that isn't even broad definition of support, that's just storytelling used to document. And a total of 479 recommendations for the Oz show and 445 recommendations from the doctors. So pretty big group of facts to look at. Now, in spite of that almost ridiculously loose definition of evidence, believable or somewhat believable evidence supported only a third of the recommendations made on the Oz show. The doctors did a little bit better at 53%. Evidence contradicted the Oz statements 15% of the time, no evidence 39% of the time. Specific benefits were promised 43% of the time on Oz, 41% of the time on doctors, and less than 1% of the time were there any disclosures about potential conflicts of interest. Now, the benefit of recommendations was not measurable most of the time, and the researchers reported that the benefit was often reported in relative rather than absolute terms. In other words, Oz uses the same statistical sleight of hand to over-exaggerate the benefits of a lot of the garbage that he recommends, just like drug and device makers use statistical sleight of hand to over-promise the benefits of drugs and devices. The author stated, quote, anyone who followed the advice provided would be doing so on the basis of trust in the host or guest rather than through a balanced explanation of benefits, harms, and costs. Now, the contrast between how the public perceives Oz and his actual reliability is significant. His show is consistently rated in the top 5 talk shows in the United States, and he's been listed as one of the top 100 health and fitness influencers in one report. And it's almost hard to believe somebody that incompetent gets to that place. In conclusion, the authors reported, quote, consumers should be skeptical about any recommendations provided on medical television talk shows, as details are limited to only a third to half of recommendations are based on believable or somewhat believable evidence. An interesting question is whether we should expect medical talk shows to provide more than entertainment. And I guess that's what I've been saying all along. It's an entertainment show, not a medical show where you look for advice about what to do for yourself. All right, so now I want to talk about PSA testing, and I have been talking about this more lately. I spent a lot of time on mammography, and we do have to give the guys equal time because they are now being just as abused by the medical system with PSA testing as women have been with mammography. I have to tell you, when I read Richard Ablin's book, The Great Prostate Hoax, last year in order to prepare my workshops on the book about PSA testing, I was horrified, and I think a lot of the men were horrified when they participated in those workshops. Several of them wrote to me and said, I am not having a PSA test. Now, Ablin clearly stated in his book, and he's the guy who discovered PSA, by the way, that PSA is not a reliable marker for prostate cancer with a false positive rate of over 80%, and never should have been approved as a screening tool for the general population. Now, recently published results from the Finnish prostate cancer screening trial, which included over 80,000 men, showed that even men with a family history of prostate cancer do not benefit from PSA testing. The researchers reported that men with a first-degree relative with prostate cancer were more likely to be diagnosed with prostate cancer than men without a family history. But the early diagnosis didn't help these men. There was no reduction in prostate cancer mortality or increase in survival for those men who were diagnosed. The researchers also reported a higher likelihood of what we call interval cancers. Those are the cancers discovered in between screenings, and they tend to be significantly more aggressive and dangerous. Now, critics of the study state that men had the PSA tests only every 4 years, and that if they had been screened more often, the results would have been better. But according to the data in Ablin's book, the test is so inaccurate, as are the follow-up biopsies, that more frequent testing would have only led to more overdiagnosis and overtreatment and the same poor results. In a commentary posted on Medscape, Gerald Chodok, MD, stated that, quote, men who have a family history of prostate cancer should be told that although they have an increased risk of getting the disease, we have no evidence to be sure that they'll benefit from screening any more than men who don't have a history of prostate cancer. And Ablin's book made it abundantly clear that no men are benefiting from PSA testing. As Ablin states in his book, the data are not likely to change the urology profession's enthusiasm for PSA testing and biopsies and procedures. There's just too much money being made by scaring men and their families into testing and treatment. So men are going to have to do the same thing I've been telling women to do for a lot of years, and that's learn to just say no to PSA testing and follow-up biopsies and procedures. Okay, that's all for today. As usual, pass this on to anybody who you think might enjoy watching it, and I'll be back to you on Thursday with more news.